is Michelle Shaman, CMG Home Loans, the Loan Diva. I am here today with Dan Sundberg, and I am so glad. Thank you, Dan.
Happy to be here.
So before we get started, because Dan is the man in the Sacramento market, and I'm super excited for him to tell you guys what's going on in Sacramento. But Dan, how did you get into real estate? Because we know none of us just go through high school and go, gosh, I want to be a realtor or I want to be a loan officer. So tell us a little bit about what drove you into this industry.
Yeah, although, I will say I started coaching and mentoring agents at EXP, the brokerage that I'm at. And there's a surprising number of people who are out of high school or like just finished college who literally were like, yeah, all I wanted to be when I was in high school was a real estate agent. Like, yeah, where did you come from? All right.
Like, great.
Yeah. So I think like most people, I kind of fell into real estate through a series of, I guess, kind of random events. So I got my PhD in organizational behavior, went to grad school, did that whole route, and had always planned on going into consulting, working specifically training, coaching, performance improvement in organizations. And did that for quite a few years, was doing the consulting thing, going out, working with companies, and got involved with a real estate company that actually a friend of mine founded, and kind of started informally consulting and helping out with some of the training and performance things, and thought it was really interesting, just liked the project, and eventually decided to come on full time, or I guess we mutually decided that I'd come on full time to do recruiting, training, and coaching for their agents within the brokerage, which was what I was doing a lot for the consulting, but just doing this specifically for real estate for this company. And during that process, I learned a lot about real estate, but I didn't have my license. And so when we started doing the training courses, none of the agents took us seriously, or took me seriously, because they were like, well, how many houses have you sold? I'm like, I've done all this, analysis of talked to a bunch of realtors and figured out best practices and all that. Like, no. How many houses have you sold? So I went out, I got my license, I sold some houses, mostly as a way to better understand the process, to better be able to coach and train our agents, but then also just to be able to have buy-in so that they would take me seriously. Even though I'd be like, hey, I got my PhD. They're like, I don't care. You don't have your real estate license. But then just kind of along the way of doing that, I found I actually really enjoyed sales as well. I mean, I got a lot of pleasure out of meeting clients, meeting families, people who were getting into their first home or their fifth home or whatever it was, and helping them along on that journey to buy and sell their house. And so now I'm probably 80% on the sales side, working the Sacramento, Elk Grove, Folsom, Roseville market, that kind of circle there. And then about 20% of my time I spend mentoring agents within our brokerage, and also still helping with the some of our back office system stuff, keeping one foot in my my consulting hat on. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at now.
That's great. And so you mentioned a lot of different markets. I know you handle all of Sacramento, like the greater Sacramento area, which does have a lot of micro markets in it. And there's a lot going on right now, from resale to new home construction. And tell us a little bit about what's happening in the market right now.
Yeah. So, Sacramento continues to be a really interesting market. So if you look at the comparison that we always get is what's going on in the Bay Area, and Sacramento has actually maintained a bit more market strength in terms of price reductions, in terms of days on market, in terms of some of these metrics of market strength compared to the Bay Area, which I remember reading just the other day that San Francisco in the Bay Area was one of the top markets for losing market value in the last several months. Going from 1.5 million to 1.4 million. So it's still, it's not anything too crazy. But what we've been seeing here is also a pretty significant uptick in price reductions, although that's leveled off in the last several weeks. At the beginning of this year, there was maybe like anywhere between 2 and 3% of the active homes for sale anywhere in the Sacramento market had a price reduction on it. Now it's closer to about 12%. So we've seen a really big uptick in price reductions. I think it was somewhere around 80% of our homes sold in the Sacramento market at the beginning of this year had multiple offers on it, whereas now that number is closer to 30 or 40%.
So you're still seeing quite a few multiple offers then.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing is, if we took this market and compared it to 2018, we'd say like, oh, this is a pretty competitive market. But everyone's context right now is the most competitive sellers market ever. So by comparison, yeah, it's cooled off. It's less aggressive of a market, but it's still, you still have to be competitive. You still have to have good financing, good offer terms. You got to be quick and relatively aggressive, but you don't got to sell your firstborn child to get a house anymore.
Yeah, you're not paying, 200,000-300,000 over asking anymore.
Exactly. And I think a good example of this is a property that I was working on with a client just the other day, where it still had multiple offers on it. When we were looking at submitting an offer, but it was maybe 3 or 4 offers. And the highest offer was over asking price. This is a nice, desirable home in a desirable neighborhood. But it was, I think, like 2 or 3% over asking price. So it was like $15,000 above asking price for this home, not $50,000 above asking price. And so I think that kind of captures a bit more of what's going on. Like, you need to be on it. You can't really be a slouch with all of your offers, but you also don't have to, again, like, bend over backwards quite as much.
Yeah. So if you had someone who's on the fence of whether they should buy now or maybe they should wait till next year, what are your feelings if the Sacramento market is the area that they're thinking of?
Yeah, well, I'll first start and say my crystal ball is also on back order like everything else. So
I know. I tell people that if I had a crystal ball, I would not be still in the work. I'd be retired.
Yeah, right. You'd find me on a tropical island somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, but no, I mean, my sense is that I don't think any of the fundamentals of why people were wanting to buy have substantially changed. Yes, interest rates are higher, but I think that only moved a certain number of people off the fence. There's still a lot of people who want to buy a house for very normal reasons and can afford to buy a house. They're growing, their family is growing, they're downsizing, they moved here for a job. Sacramento market is still comparatively affordable. The number one migration market that we have is people coming from the Bay Area. And those 8 million people are still looking for affordable housing. So where are they going to go? Sacramento. And I was actually just talking about this with an investor client of mine who was looking between Central Valley markets and saying, do I go Stockton? Do I go Fresno? Do I go Modesto? Do I Sacramento? And my take on Sacramento is you've got government, the capital, that's somewhere around 18 to 20% of the jobs. You've got healthcare, an enormous healthcare system out here. You've got universities, and you've got agriculture, right? So those kind of core, relatively inflexible jobs, I think, are just going to keep driving people to Sacramento. So
what are you seeing in the rental rates? Because I've seen a lot of people, I mean, just yesterday, I got a call from someone and they're like, my landlord just raised my rent $462 a month. I'm like, well, that's an odd number. But at the same time, it's like, that's a lot to increase someone's rent per month. And so, running numbers, it seemed like it was more beneficial for them to purchase a home than to accept another 12-month lease, which puts them into, an even more of an unknown next year. What are you seeing in that Sacramento area?
I think same thing. The rental, I forget the stats on it exactly now, but rental rates have gone up by double digits last year and the year before. And they keep going up. And I think especially too, as inflation keeps going up, investors, what do they look to for an inflation hedge, right? It's real estate.
Yeah.
So I think that trend will continue, which means more people trying to buy rental properties, trying to rent them out, and really trying to maximize returns, which unfortunately means higher rents.
Right. That's what I've seen. And I've been, trying to help people along that side. I mean, it's not like right now, because there's such a high demand and there's a really low percentage of vacancies right now. Mm-hmm. I think the housing shortage, especially in a market like Sacramento, is hurting those renters. And I think they don't realize if you can qualify, even with down payment assistance programs, we have all kinds of down payment assistance, even something that will help you get that down payment. now's the time. In my mind, now's the time to buy. And I know you're super analytical, way more analytical than I am. So that's why I wanted to pick your brain on this one, because, I'd like to give people a heads up of, hey, if rents are going to continue to go up, like I think Core Logic said, a minimum of like 9% this year to next year on rental increases. That's a lot for some people.
Yeah. Well, and Michelle, I think that's a really good point too, of rental increases and people looking at that as like, this is something that's coming down the line. And I think, there's a large segment of people out there who are in properties where maybe they haven't had those rental increases and they're thinking, oh, I'm in pretty good shape because this isn't happening. But I've unfortunately seen several situations where someone who became a client of mine had no intention of buying a house, had no intention of moving out of their rental, had been there for 15 or 20 years, great relationship with their landlord, the rent never got raised, all of these things that you'd say, oh, of course I want to stick around. And something happened in the landlord's personal life and they needed to sell, or they just decided, hey, I've been a landlord for 20 or 30 years, I'm going to sell. And then what happens is the next person who acquires that property is not so nice. And so by sticking around in the rental, even if you're not getting hit by it yet, you're really leaving your fate in the hands of someone else's good graces or their good health, or their family who pushes them enough to say, all right, let's sell this rental property and move out of the country or whatever. And so then that kind of forces you to make a decision under the gun, and that's not a fun place to be in. And I just another thought that you made me think about, of now being a good time for those people who are maybe on the fence, who are renting, thinking about getting into something, right? You can qualify for enough to buy a single family or enough to buy a condo. With the market having shifted the way that it has in the last couple of months, I know we've talked about this a few times, but we're able to, on the real estate side, get seller credits more than we have in the last 2 years. And I'm sure you can speak much more intelligently than I can about this, but you can use that seller credit then to pay closing costs or to buy down your monthly payment, which can be huge for a lot of buyers.
Right. We're seeing that more and more right now, even in new construction, where people are going out and they're getting 2% and 3% seller credits. Mm-hmm. And the good part about that is if you've got 3% to buy down your interest rate now is going to be where it was several months ago, and you're not struggling with that higher payment. And sometimes that allows a buyer to be able to qualify for a higher purchase price. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely, I think, more of a buyer's market right now. And I know you both work with buyers and listings, sellers. So what's your advice to, someone who's thinking about listing their home right now?
Yeah, I would say market by market, it's still a seller's market in a lot of places, neighborhood by neighborhood as we go through. The difference, the biggest difference now is that our sellers, we can't get away with asking for whatever we want, right? Up until very recently, traditional practice was, we look at comparable sales, we see how your house compares to everything else. We give you a range, a low end and a high end, and we price somewhere in the middle low end, depending on how aggressive we want to be. And kind of have that as like, all right, we're gonna be about in the middle of the market. For the last 2 years, it's been, let's go to the top and then add 5%, and that's kind of been the practice, and good for the sellers that got it, right? They were able to get those prices. Now we're not. And so if you have a good pricing strategy and have a realtor who's not going to roll over and tell you, okay, I'll sell your house for whatever, because we're just not in that market anymore. And so having really good pricing strategy and good marketing strategy, making sure that you can get it in front of as many people as possible, because it's not the case that you can just put a for sale up sign in your front yard and the house is going to sell. So houses absolutely are still selling. It's just you've got to have that pricing and that marketing strategy much more dialed in now to make that happen, which is very doable. It just means, getting someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think that's where, listing with you comes in handy, because you are so analytical that the people, like, I know the people that I refer to you, they're like, wow, this guy knows everything. I'm like, yes. I go, you listen to what your realtor says. That's super important right now, because I've had other clients where they don't listen to what their realtor says and they list their house, 15, 10, 20% above what they really should be listing it at, and then it sits. And then it gets stale. And then they're coming back and they're like, I should have listened to you in the very beginning. I said, I told you, if your realtor's telling you to list it here, they watch the market every day. So it's super important to listen. And I appreciate all the analytics that you do on the market. And I know you and I constantly have these conversations. And that's why I was so glad that you're taking time out today to
happy to do it,
so that we can share some of our little secret fun conversations with people, because it's super important to know what's going on in the market, whether you're a buyer or a seller right now. It's very
absolutely
important.
I think more so now than at any other time, because things are changing so rapidly that it is very important to kind of keep your finger on the pulse and know what's going on, so that you can be as informed when you do make this big decision.
Right. And speaking of rapidly, just in case you're watching this at a later date, this is the last few days of August of 2022. And if you need details of where the current market is, depending on when you're watching this video, you can feel free to reach out to Dan. Dan, what is the easiest way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so if you want to hit me up on Instagram, I'm at Dan Sundberg 916. That's SUNDBERG. Or you can just give me a call or a text at 925-272-8481. Okay,
and we will have all of your information on the end of the screen. And thank you, Dan. I appreciate you so much, and your intelligence and your analytics. And, I love these conversations all the time. So
thanks, Michelle. Well, I love working with you, so that's an easy one.